It's genuinely hard to like explain to companies sometimes when I'm doing like consulting what a true community means, because they don't get it. Like they weren't. That's not how they grew up.
People buy our clothes. So
Yeah.
that's a community. That's like, nah.
It's really
It's
hard
like
to explain.
People like what your brand stands for, and people they identify themselves in your logo. So when they see someone else wearing your logo, that excites them. Remember back in the day, if you saw someone wearing Supreme, you'd be gassed because you feel like you both understand each other.
And you can and which is I think something that's missing today. Whereas like when I was younger, if I saw someone in the street wearing a studded belt, skinny jeans, colorful skinny jeans with shutter shades,
you know they're into jerky.
I know. I know they know who the Rangers are. I know they know who Langston is. I know they know who Julian Alexander is. I know this. Like, and it's that's the thing about subcultures too, because if you think of subcultures, whether you're talking about like new Edwardians or punks or whatever, it's the same thing. You see someone dress a certain way, you can start to assume that they're in your same tribe, and you can just be friends just off the way you dress, literally.
Bro, legit. So, and that's how I imagine a lot of people feel about Cortez today. That's what I think is really cool about Cortez. Because one of my favorite Virgil quotes is he was like, "Oh, Supreme was my Louis Vuitton."
Right.
And I think that's how kids see Cortez. They're like, Cortez is their Louis Vuitton. Like, to them, that's all that matters in fashion. They see someone else wearing Cortez, they know they identify with the same thing. They might have the same values, all that sort of stuff. That's what a community is about.
Someone said, if you wear a black shirt, you're opium. But that's genuinely how I feel about Martine, because I think Martine gets that, like, culturally.
Oh,
Martine
100%.
like, understands.
That's why when
Martine it's so hard to explain once again in like a stream or video format, because it's just there's so many elements.
Yeah, there's so much nuances, and it's like things that you and I see subconsciously just walking around the streets of London. It's hard to kind of reiterate that on stream. Right. But I'm thinking about even down to her doing stuff like when she does a runway, it might just be on a random street in London, and members of the public can just sit and watch. They're allowed to just sit and watch. That's so anti-fashion.
People watching the runway show out of their bedroom window.
And it's like, and that makes her happy. But that's it's so Martine Rose, it's so London, it's so tapped into the culture and into community. Like, it's very difficult to explain, actually.
Yeah. It's so true though. It's so true. It's like, even like I try to explain it culturally, but it's still part of it is just like the feeling you get, which is very hard to explain. Super was like Dior for me when I was a little jittery. Facts. Like, for example, I can let me do a test in this stream. Do any of you know what the brand Vlado? Do any of you know about like Vlados? If any of you know what Vlado is, I can already like assume that you know about certain things. Like if you've heard of Vlado. Yeah, Vlado is the sneakers, exactly. Exactly, the shoes. I think some people Googled it. But if you genuinely knew what Vlados are, like, let me put them on this screen. Okay, not even those ones. That's not what I'm looking for. So these, if you know about these, I know that you know about certain things. Like, if you've seen these shoes before, like, I know that you're from that era.
They said you're doing a pop quiz.
Basically, what these were, like, in, the jerkin time.
Yeah.
This was a brand that kind of tapped into the
purple Vladas with the V-neck. Facts.
Because they tapped into the whole jerkin scene. So they started making, because people wore Vans in jerkin, but Vans at the time didn't have really weird colorways.
Yeah.
So Vlado were kind of making shoes that looked like Vans, but they had the weird colorways, and then they also made the front of the shoe harder.
Exactly. So because when you're doing your footwork,
when you're doing your footwork on your toes, or you're like pin dropping and stuff, you'll be able to like do it a lot more effectively on these shoes. So a lot of the jerker, the jerk crews and all those kind of guys back then used to wear them and endorse them, and they were sponsored by Vlado. So, but that's what I mean about like a subcultural thing and like streetwear. So like this shoe is more than just a shoe. You got what I mean? It's more than, it's like a very deep cultural thing. And you, like, if you think of a certain time period, that's like what it reminds you of, and that's what streetwear is. It's not just about like just getting a hoodie and like putting a print on a tee. It's like you have to like, streetwear always has like a cultural element where it's like this clothing is embedded into a certain culture or subculture. But because, for example, this was such like a California thing, like
no, but we're acting, all joking videos back then were going viral.
I know, like, but it was there were people all over the world doing it, but it was mainly a California thing. But what I'm saying is, because in London it was so niche. If I saw someone wearing Vlados, it's so niche that like I already know you're in, like I know you're into jerking. I know you watch the Power Rangers on YouTube. Like I like I just know just from wearing those shoes, because it's so niche. Like, how are you wearing Vlados in London? Like, how? They didn't even sell, like, they were so hard to buy because it was only based in the US. They didn't ship worldwide. So you'd have to like proxy it to London or something. So how the hell do you have Vlados in London?
Get a reshipper.
Exactly. Or you just went to the US to buy it, and then so it's like, it's just stuff like that. And that's like when it comes to street, and that's why I can't, because I get the true essence of what streetwear is so deeply, which is why I'm always going to put it on the same level as like high fashion. They're just two different things.
I said they're just adjacent.
But people find it hard to like see them together. One has to be better than the other or more superior.
For me as well, the reason, if we tie it back to the conversation about like, is supreme fashion? I just think it's extremely disingenuous to deny the impact that Supreme has had on high fashion in the modern day and in the modern culture. In 2024, the fact that even like you can walk into Celine and buy like a Celine hoodie, that's so like streetwear coded.
That's the Supreme, that's the Supreme and Off-White effect.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? So if we can't act like they don't influence each other, like it's silly to.
Someone who comes from that high fashion only thought process will just see Vapors. It's just like Air Force Ones with a star, without any of the cultural context to what it actually means. But that's what happens. That's what happens.
That means you just didn't watch any music videos between like 2002 and.
But you're saying that, but not every. Think about high fashion. Most high fashion people are snooty. I only listen to like classical music maybe and jazz, whereas like I listen to classical music and jazz, but I also listen to hip hop. But it's because people like to always rank things. They can't just appreciate things as a whole. So the kind of quintessential high fashion person is like anything streetwear adjacent, that's trash. Like hip hop,
Ironically as well, the people who have publicly shown that they understand both have been some of the most effective and cultural disruptors in fashion.
100%.
Like Kim Jones, Virgil Abloh, like I had someone else in mind who's like active right now.
Right.
And it's like, I like Kim Jones as an example because you can't turn around and tell me Kim Jones doesn't understand tailoring. You can't turn around and tell me that Kim Jones doesn't understand like that elite snobby level of high fashion. But he's also a huge sneakerhead.
Of course he does. He's been at Louis Vuitton and Dior forever.
For like 5 years. Man's at Fendi, man's at Dior. Like, do you know what I mean? But then at the same time, man's out here wearing his Off-White ones, talking about how big his sneaker collection is. He obviously understands, like he very obviously understands both worlds. I'm seeing old interviews where Virgil's saying, yeah, I used to sleep on Kim Jones' couch.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
when you pointed out Marc Jacobs is definitely someone that understands
Marc
that.
Jacobs is the godfather.
Marc Jacobs definitely understands that.
For sure.
Like Marc Jacobs is definitely from the world of like understanding the cultural significance of streetwear and also understanding the world of high fashion. Like there aren't too many people
Marc Jacobs
that do
is
that.
Into like graffiti artists and stuff like that. Like
what Stephen Sprouse and like
But even like just from on some New York stuff, like Demna, I'll give it to Demna as well for sure. Because that's the reason Balenciaga is Balenciaga.
Yeah, Demna does.
Martine
Rose does.
Grace Wells Bonner.
Yeah, Grace Wells Bonner. Trying to think what like big time designer understands
what I'm trying to think of as well.
I think Eddie Saman understands it to an extent. I wouldn't say to the extent.
I think
he
understands it. He just doesn't need it.
Yeah,
I
think
Eddie Saman.
I get the sense that Eddie Saman does understand.
Because I'd argue that the heady boy is like one of the closest things in like snobby high fashion to like a community.
Right.
Think about the way they move.
Right.
And the way like they interact with each other.
And the way that they don't eat food together. No, I'm joking. Oh yeah, Rick Owens does too. He does. Yeah, Rick Owens does.
Me personally, off the top of my head, I haven't seen many instances of Rick directly interacting or like observing streetwear culture. But maybe it's happened.
But from stuff I've seen him design, I get a sense that he does.
First.
And from people that he's worked with also, I get a sense that he does. But it's hard because, like, once again, like I'm just thinking of like times when I was in fashion school. I could not. There's only one guy, you know, Jotaro.
Yeah.
He's the only guy. I swear to you, in that whole our school, and that was like the whole journalism course, like MA, BA. Like Jotaro was the only person who understood the world of streetwear and the world of high fashion together. But it makes you a better journalist because
it does.
Because as a journalist, you need to understand fashion in its totality. You can't just do like what these old journalists do. I'm not going to mention some of their names, where they just dismiss things because they don't even understand the culture around it or where it goes. How can you truly understand like fashion from all angles if you only care about one subsector
and it's
of
that
fashion?
Thing I say all the time of like, I'm someone that believes art should be measured by what the art was trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And the problem with those people who can't really understand streetwear is that they'll try and measure streetwear to a standard that it was never trying to achieve.
Right.
So it's like you're like, oh, this clothing is terrible because, you know, there's no the construction is not interesting and the silhouettes are basic and they're printing on Gildan tees.
Mm-hmm.
But they weren't aiming to push the boundaries of silhouettes. So why are you judging them to that? like,
and also they don't even have the means to do what people are expecting. So people are expecting them to like do what Louis Vuitton does. Like Louis Vuitton is literally a multi-billion-dollar brand.
Word.
Like this is some guy printing Gildan tees in his room.
Exactly. And even Louis Vuitton, bro. How much these days? When was the last time Louis Vuitton pushed the boundaries of a silhouette?
Right.
Probably like 6 years ago.
Right.
If that. Like, and it applies to the art world too as well. Like, imagine you're talking to like a flipping collagist, and you're being like, "Oh, you didn't." I'm judging your work to the scale of like how well you integrated fine art stroke brushes.
Right.
And the person's like, "Well, that's not what I was trying to do. I was just trying to make a collage." Like, you can't judge. You just can't judge art. You have to judge it by what the artist was aiming to do.
Right.
And the same applies to music as well. So that's that thing you were saying earlier of like, well, when Adunsi's coming on doing all sorts of Afro fusion with
like alternative
music, and you're trying to judge it to the standard of very traditional Afro beat, like P Square,
which is not what it is,
which is not what it is or what it was ever aiming to be. The same with Moa and her music and Dato Black and Chi Virgo, like it just doesn't make sense.
This YouTube channel runs on your support. If you want to support the channel, you can subscribe to my Patreon. You'll gain access to exclusive content that includes everything from my Patreon podcast, where I give a behind-the-scenes insight into the fashion industry, as well as a fashion book club, where I review my favorite fashion books. You can also check out my fashion ebook, which highlights the best fashion journalists to follow, definitions of common fashion terminology, and how to determine what a good source of fashion information is. The links to everything are in the description below.